Let's now discuss another form of protectionism. This one's referred to as a quota. We're going to set the stage again. We got the market for Nerf footballs. We have home and row, and then the international market is where they trade. Home is small. That's meaningless to us now, but next week when we talk about tariffs in a large country, that'll be more meaningful. So home, the market for Nerf footballs, I've deliberately put the supply and demand curves kind of high to give that high PA and a low supply and demand a low supply and demand curve to give a low PA. In other words, I'm giving row a comparative advantage. Prices are lower in row than they are in home for Nerf footballs, and that's our basis for trade. Somebody's going to figure that out and start bringing footballs from here into here in order to make a profit. That's called arbitrage. How many units are going to be brought across? Well, we know we can find the demand for imports by stepping off at PA, that's that point right there, and then going down, we've done this a bunch of times, by the number of units that these spread apart as the price gets lower. So that gives us that, and we call that demand for imports. And then a supply of imports, PA, the stepping off point here is PA star, so you get a PA star and you go up by the distance at which these two spread apart as price gets higher. And then those will eventually cross, and that gives us M for imports. This is how many units will be brought from row to home if they're allowed to engage in free trade. And I didn't draw this to scale, I don't think, but if I did, then that distance right there should be equal to that distance. See, I'm short there, and also equal to that distance right there. So I'm pretty close there. And where these two intersect, you can draw a line across all three, and that's PW. That's the law of one price. That's the world price. Everybody, if free trade is allowed, and we have all these other assumptions like no transportation costs, then everybody would pay PW for Nerf footballs. Once we've done that, we can see what's happened here. In home, before, the home producer used to get this whole triangle, right? They used to get all of that out of producer surplus, and consumers got that triangle right there for consumer surplus. That was an autarky. Now that we're in free trade, producer surplus has gotten a lot smaller. It's that tiny little triangle right here. It's this piece right here. So of course they're upset. They say, we used to get all this in producer surplus, now we get that little piece right there. Now from an economist perspective, we're not going to pick sides on this. We're going to say, sure, producers are worse off. They get that little piece, but the piece they lost in here, this piece winds up going to consumers, so that's consumer surplus, and consumers pick up this piece. So that's a societal surplus benefit from free trade. Home is better off because of this, but producers don't want to hear that. They're worse off, so they're going to lobby their government for some kind of assistance, and the assistance we're going to demonstrate here is called a quota. So just for an example, let's say that M is equal to 10 units. 10 units would come across. So producers here might then go to their domestic government and say, you got to help me, I'm getting killed by this world price. I can barely produce any units that are profit anymore. You guys have to make a rule, and maybe that would be helpful if you only allowed 5 units to come over. That's a quota. You only allow a certain number of units to come over. So the way we would model that is, whatever the quota is, 5, draw a straight up and down line right at 5. And we're going to call that QQ. That's the quantity of the quota. You're allowed to bring 5 units over. So you get this interesting point right here, because this point winds up becoming the new price. And we're going to call that PQ. Wherever that QQ line touches on demand for imports, that's your new price. So that's the price in quota. So from there, we can do our welfare analysis. We now know that this many units, let's call that 3, would be produced by domestic producers. That's our supply curve. This many units would be consumed in total. I'm going to call that 8. And where do those other 5 units come from? Well, those other 5 units, they come from imports. And it would be more, but a quota only allows 5. So now we have all our pieces together. This piece right here. This piece was producer surplus in free trade. Sure, they were upset by that, so they lobbied for a quota, and they got a quota. What did they pick up from that? They picked up this piece. Right? They gained that. So they're now better off. Okay? What happened to consumer surplus? Consumer surplus in autarky, consumer surplus was this piece. In free trade, they picked up this for sure, and they picked up that, and that. But now that we've engaged in a quota, we're going to have to change some of that, because even with a quota, they still pick up this piece, right? They get to enjoy those extra 5 units at a price that would have been lower than price in autarky. However, they no longer get this piece. The quota has then transferred this piece from consumers to producers. That winds up becoming producer surplus, right? Now, the quota, this piece right here, becomes interesting because of the quota. Let me find a marker I can use to outline that. So this piece winds up becoming pretty interesting. I'm going to put QR in there. We call that quota rent. Quota rent. So somebody is going to Row and buying these goods at a relatively low price, PA star, and they are allowed to buy 5 of them and bring them back into, or even buying them at PW, but if they buy them at PA star or PW star, they're allowed to buy up to 5 of those, no more than 5 because of the quota, and bring them back into this country and sell them at PQ. If we put numbers on this, let's say they bought them at PW, that's $6, and they got to sell them at PQ, that's $7, and they got to sell 5 of them, they would be allowed by the home government to buy these units for $6, bring them over here, and sell them for $7. So the value of that is worth $5. Quota rent in this case is 5 units times $1 equals $5. So the question now becomes, who gets that? Well, the government could use that to curry favor with individuals within their economy. I could give that to some business person in exchange for some kind of favor. Or I could sell that as a license, and that's what happens a lot of times. So I could offer a license for you to have the right to buy those units and bring them over here, allowing only 5 of them, and then gaining that $5. And if that were true, then how much would people pay for that license? Well, the license value is worth $5. So what would people pay? Would people pay? Well, I would say no more than $4.99, right? People want to make money, so they definitely would not pay anything more than $4.99. That piece becomes pretty interesting because it's not clear who gets that. A government could give that away as a favor. A government could sell that through licensing, or a government could do a number of other things with that. Now, there's one other piece of this that we should look at, and that's our deadweight loss. We've looked at deadweight loss already through a tariff, but that's this piece, right? We've now lost this piece. That's production distortion, and we've lost this piece. That's consumption distortion. These units never happened. They would have happened under free trade, but they never happened. These units would have been made over there, but now they're made here, and this is less efficient to make them in. So that's a distortion. That's lost. Both of those are a loss to society. So society is worse off because of this quota, but the producer is better, and that was their goal all along.